Warning, it only gets worse from here. Let's start. The first complaint came in on a Monday morning. Not unlike the hundreds Tom Spencer had dealt with before, a renter upset about hidden fees. The guy on the phone was irate, shouting over some extra charges he'd noticed after renting a simple sedan. Tom was used to it. After all, customer service at a car rental company wasn't exactly cushy. People always wanted to complain, and half the time they were just looking for a discount. But there was something about this one that stuck with Tom. Something wasn't right. Tom sighed, cradling the phone between his shoulder and ear, typing the man's rental agreement number into the computer. His eyes scanned the line items. Customer protection fee? What's this? Tom muttered, mostly to himself, but loud enough that the caller, still ranting, picked up on it. Yeah, exactly. What the hell is it? I didn't agree to anything like that. Tom rubbed his temple and tried to calm the man down. Look, let me do some digging. I'll figure this out for you. Tom ended the call, promising to call back once he figured out what had gone wrong. Usually these were just honest mistakes, some glitch in the system or a clerk hitting the wrong button. But as Tom leaned back in his creaky office chair, a nagging feeling told him there was something more. He trusted his gut. It had kept him out of trouble during all those years on the customer service front lines. Tom turned to Rachel Thompson, a junior customer service rep who was hunched over her own desk a few feet away. Hey Rachel, have you been seeing a lot of these weird fee complaints lately? Hidden charges, stuff that customers never agreed to? Rachel looked up, her glasses slipping slightly down her nose. Her face showed a flicker of hesitation. She shrugged, and her eyes darted away. Yeah, a few here and there. Could just be, to cover ourselves, just in case. She said it casually, like it was no big deal. Tom frowned. He knew Rachel. Quiet, always focused on her work. She wasn't the type to cut corners. Just in case of what exactly? Rachel hesitated again, her voice a bit lower this time. Jim's been talking about how we need to maximize revenue. Said a few extra fees here and there could make a difference. Tom's stomach dropped a little. Jim Hardy, the regional supervisor, was a numbers guy. All about the bottom line, profit margins, making the shareholders happy. He didn't care about the little people who rented cars to take their kids on vacation or visit sick relatives. To Jim, renters were just dollar signs. But this felt like something else. It felt wrong. Tom thanked Rachel, got up from his desk, and headed over to Jim's office. The guy always had his door closed, like he was keeping secrets, which Tom realized maybe he was. He knocked twice before pushing the door open. Jim looked up from his cluttered desk, a tight smile spreading across his face. Tom, what's up, buddy? Something on your mind? Tom stepped inside, feeling the tension in his shoulders. I've been getting a lot of complaints about hidden fees lately, Jim. Customers are seeing charges they never agreed to, like this customer protection fee. What's that even for? Jim waved a hand dismissively, leaning back in his plush chair. Oh, that. Just some additional revenue opportunities we've implemented. Nothing major. Customers won't notice, and even if they do, it's all in the fine print. You know how it goes. Tom stared at him, trying to keep his cool. Jim, we can't just add fees without telling people. It's unethical. Hell, it's probably illegal. Jim's smile faded. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Tom, listen. You're new to this role, so let me give you a bit of advice. The company's got to make money. If that means a few technical surcharges, so be it. This isn't about ethics, it's about survival. You want your department to look good, don't you? Tom clenched his jaw. This was worse than he'd thought. Jim wasn't just aware of the fees, he was orchestrating them, pushing his employees to scam customers for a few extra bucks. Tom felt a cold sweat forming on the back of his neck. He had to figure out just how deep this went. He left Jim's office without another word, heading back to his desk. He knew he couldn't let this slide, not on his watch. Tom decided to do what he did best, investigate. He spent the rest of the day digging through recent transactions, combing through rental agreements, flagging every customer protection fee, and any other charge that didn't make sense. As the office lights dimmed, Tom was still at it. The numbers didn't lie. There were hundreds of these charges, all small enough to not raise too much suspicion but adding up to tens of thousands of dollars. He could see a pattern: certain clients, fake names, repeat transactions. It was like someone was creating phantom customers just to squeeze more money out of the system. Tom's eyes burned from staring at the screen, but he knew he was onto something. He printed the records, tucking the pages into a folder. He glanced at Rachel on his way out. She looked nervous, avoiding eye contact as she gathered her things. "Hey, Rachel," Tom called softly, waiting until she met his gaze. "You've been adding these charges because Jim told you to, haven't you?" Rachel swallowed hard, her face paling. She nodded slightly. "He said it was just policy, that if I wanted to keep my job, I'd do it." Tom nodded. He didn't blame Rachel. She was just trying to keep her head above water in a company that didn't care about anything but money. "Don't worry, I'm going to handle this." The next day, Tom walked into the office with the folder under his arm, ready to confront Jim. But before he could reach Jim's office, he was stopped by two men in suits. "Mr. Spencer, Jim wants to see you," one of them said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tom followed them, his stomach in knots. Jim was sitting behind his desk, a smug smile on his face. He gestured for Tom to sit down. Tom, Jim said, shaking his head. "You've been a busy bee, haven't you?" Tom didn't sit. He slapped the folder down on Jim's desk. "This is fraud, Jim. You're scamming customers, using fake names, pocketing the money. You think no one's going to notice?" Jim's smile didn't falter. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You're right, Tom. It's fraud. But let me tell you something. I've got the company's legal team on my side, and you've got a non-compete clause in your contract. You try to blow the whistle, and not only will you lose your job, but I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Tom felt his heart drop. Jim wasn't bluffing. He'd seen the lengths corporate would go to protect their own. He felt his hands clench into fists, his nails digging into his palms. "So what now?" Jim smiled, standing up and patting Tom on the shoulder. "Now, you do what's best for you. You take the promotion I'm offering, a nice raise, better benefits, and you forget all about this." Tom stood there, his mind racing. He had a choice: walk away and lose everything, or stay and become part of the very corruption he despised. His stomach churned, but he knew he couldn't fight Jim. Not now. Maybe not ever. He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "Fine, I'll stay." Jim's grin widened. "Smart man. Welcome to the team, Tom." As Tom walked out of the office, he felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. He'd come here to make things better, to change the way the company treated its customers. Now, he was trapped, just another cog in the machine. He glanced over at Rachel, who gave him a questioning look. He forced a smile, but inside, he knew the truth. He'd lost. For now, at least. But as he sat back down at his desk, Tom made himself a promise. He might be stuck playing the game, but he wasn't giving up. One day, he'd find a way to bring Jim down, to expose everything, and when that day came, he'd be ready. The following days were some of the longest of Tom's career. He went through the motions, answering calls, managing customer service issues, pretending everything was just fine. Jim had made it clear that any resistance would cost Tom dearly, but that didn't mean Tom would go quietly. He watched everything, paid attention to every word Jim said, every instruction he gave. Tom began taking notes, scribbling down dates, times, and details, keeping a personal ledger of every shady action he was ordered to take. Rachel kept her distance, and Tom couldn't blame her. She was scared, just like he was, but Tom could tell that she wanted to do the right thing. Every time their eyes met, he saw the unspoken question, "Are we really going to let this happen?" And each time, Tom gave her a small, reassuring nod. He couldn't promise her much, but he could promise that he wasn't going to let it end this way. Tom started staying late, going over documents long after everyone else had gone home. He'd become familiar with the system, the fake names, the extra charges, the routing numbers that led to nowhere. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered, and the angrier he became. This wasn't just about making a few extra bucks. Jim and the higher-ups were milking honest people for thousands, lining their own pockets while everyone else struggled to make ends meet. One night, as Tom was leaving the office, Rachel caught up to him. Her face was. Story 2. The first sign that something was wrong came around 2 a.m., somewhere between the third and fourth customer complaint. Marcus Green sat at his desk, fingers drumming as he listened to yet another angry voice on the line. "Your security software is trash," the customer growled. "It's recording me. Every conversation, every single thing I do, even when I don't want it to. What the hell are you people playing at?" Marcus knew the script by heart. Apologize, reassure, maybe reboot the system. But this call was different. His stomach clenched as the customer described something chilling. The security software wasn't just glitching. No, the program was actively recording every bit of life it could get its sensors on. Audio, video, everything. Even when the device was supposed to be off. He brushed it off as paranoia. People got jumpy about tech these days, thinking every beep and blink was some government conspiracy. But as more calls came in, all with eerily similar complaints, Marcus found it harder to ignore. He leaned back in his chair, a flicker of suspicion dancing in his eyes. The hairs on his neck prickled. What if these people weren't imagining things? Jake Miller, his best friend and fellow night shift tech, ambled over during the next lull. Jake had that kind of laid-back swagger, always quick with a grin. Tonight, though, his face was set in a frown. He dropped into the chair beside Marcus and nudged him. "You're getting those weird-ass calls too, huh?" Marcus sighed. "Yeah, Jake. I think something's up. Maybe it's just a bug, but it's too consistent." He paused, eyeing Elise Zhang, their new team leader, who was hunched over her desk, her eyes glued to her monitor like she was hacking into the Pentagon. Something about her felt off. Too ambitious, too good at her job, too keen on making connections up the corporate ladder. Jake lowered his voice, glancing in Elise's direction. "Listen, man, you gotta watch her. She's smart, yeah, but there's something shady. I've heard whispers. She's got plans. Big plans." Marcus shook his head, half smiling. "Come on, Jake. She's just doing her job. Maybe she's climbing a bit faster, but that's corporate life." But Jake's words stuck with him, gnawing at the back of his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that Elise was somehow wrapped up in all this. Maybe she knew more than she was letting on. That night, after Jake clocked out, Marcus stayed late, his screen glowing in the otherwise dark office. The cursor blinked back at him as he ran a few deep searches through the company's internal system. The deeper he went, the stranger things got. There were encrypted files tied to the security software, logs that shouldn't have existed, call recordings, footage from people's living rooms, even sound bites from private conversations. Marcus's blood ran cold as he clicked through them. It was real. The software wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. He felt a chill ripple through him as he began to piece it together. Someone high up had put this in place. Someone with access. Someone who knew how to hide in the shadows. He thought of Elise, her sudden promotion, her late nights in the office. But then, a twist of doubt made him think of Jake. What if Jake knew more than he was saying? What if Jake was trying to cover his own tracks, planting seeds of doubt about Elise? Confused, tired, and more than a little scared, Marcus decided to confront Elise directly. He approached her the next day, but she simply smiled, her eyes glinting with a hint of something dark. "Marcus, you really shouldn't be snooping around where you don't belong," she said, her voice honey-sweet but cold as ice. His mouth went dry. She knew. The following night, Marcus came back to work, heart pounding. He tried to tell Jake what he'd found, but Jake wasn't there. Elise met him instead, her smile wider, colder. "Jake's out sick," she said. "He's been having some technical difficulties." Marcus felt the room spin. The monitors on his desk blinked to life. Footage of him, sitting there at his desk, talking with Jake, reviewing the recordings. Every move he'd made, every word he'd said had been captured. He was on screen, the star of a show he didn't even know he was in. Elise leaned in, whispering, her breath hot against his ear. "I've been watching you, Marcus. You're good, but you're not good enough. This is my show now." The footage shifted, showing Marcus, edited and distorted, as if he were confessing to setting up the surveillance himself. His voice, twisted and sliced into damning phrases, filled the empty office space. Marcus realized he was trapped. The security software, the company, Elise's ambitions. He was nothing but a pawn. And now, it was his face that was going to take the fall. Elise gave him one last smile, then walked away, leaving Marcus alone with the screens, his distorted voice echoing back at him, sealing his fate. The office was silent, the screens flickering, and Marcus understood the horror of it all. Sometimes, it wasn't about the tech failing. Sometimes it worked perfectly, doing exactly what the worst people wanted it to do. The next morning, Marcus sat at his desk, his hands trembling as he replayed the footage. Every damning second of it seemed to grow heavier on his shoulders. Elise had played him masterfully, and now she held every card. He tried to think of a way out, a way to clear his name, but everywhere he turned, Elise had already been there, covering her tracks, setting traps. Marcus couldn't just sit and wait for the inevitable. He knew he had to do something, anything, to find a way to fight back. He thought about Jake. Jake had warned him. Jake might know more. He needed to find him. That day, instead of heading home after his shift, Marcus drove to Jake's apartment. He knocked, waited, then knocked again, harder this time. The door opened just a crack, and there was Jake, pale, dark circles under his eyes. "Marcus, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here, man. It's not safe," Jake whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Marcus pushed his way inside, shutting the door behind him. "Jake, I need your help. Elise set me up. She's using the software to frame me. I need to know what you know, please." Jake hesitated, then nodded, motioning for Marcus to follow him to the back of the apartment. He led him to a cluttered room, computer parts and wires scattered everywhere. Jake sat down at his desk and began typing furiously, pulling up file after file. "I've been digging too," Jake said. "Elise is dangerous. She's got dirt on everyone, executives, board members, even government officials. She's been using the software to gather leverage, and anyone who gets in her way, well, they end up like you or worse." Jake clicked on a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were recordings, documents, all the proof Marcus needed. "I've been keeping this in case I needed to make a move, but it's risky. She's got eyes everywhere," Jake warned. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. This was it. This was his chance to fight back. But before he could say anything, there was a loud crash. The front door burst open and heavy footsteps echoed through the apartment. "Shit! They found us!" Jake hissed, shoving a flash drive into Marcus's hand. "Take this. Get out of here. I'll hold them off." Marcus's heart pounded. "Jake, no. I can't just leave you." Jake pushed him towards the window. "Go, Marcus. If you don't, none of this will matter. Expose her. Make it count." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then climbed out of the window, dropping down into the alley below. He heard shouting, the sound of a struggle, but he forced himself to keep moving. He couldn't think about Jake now. He had to focus on getting out, on making sure Elise didn't win. The city felt different that night. Every shadow a threat, every sound a warning. Marcus kept his head down, moving quickly through the streets until he reached a small motel on the outskirts of town. He paid in cash, ducked into the room, and locked the door behind him. Only then did he allow himself a moment to breathe, to try and steady his shaking hands. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop, watching as the files loaded. It was all there, everything he needed to bring Elise down. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. Elise had connections, power, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. He had to be smart, had to be careful. As dawn broke, Marcus began to formulate a plan. He would go public. He would leak everything, send it to the media, to watchdog groups, to anyone who would listen. He couldn't do it alone, but maybe, just maybe, with the right people on his side, he could take Elise down, clear his name, and make sure no one else would fall victim to her schemes. The road ahead was uncertain, and the danger was far from over. But Marcus knew one thing. He wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. Elise had made one mistake. She underestimated just how far he was willing to go to protect his family, to protect the truth. And as Marcus hit send on the first batch of files, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Elise might have won the battle, but the war was far from over.